Welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom. I hope you enjoyed the bye week. This is the Out of Structure podcast with Matt Stagner and Ron Kopp Jr. on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us as we discuss looking back at the bye week, all the things that happened positive for the Chiefs in the last few days with them not having to do a whole lot. And then also maybe we'll review some of the things from the first half of the season as we look forward to a big matchup next week. But before we get into all that, Ron, how you doing today?
I mean, Stags, it's a victory Tuesday. I think you could say the Chiefs won the bye week. I mean, there's a very reasonable argument to make that the Chiefs didn't get a win in the actual column, but pretty much won as they sat at home this weekend. I mean, wow. I mean, the what a Sunday for the Chiefs, and a Monday too. We just watched the Bills somehow blow that game last second to the Broncos at home, falling to 5-5. I mean, I don't know, Stag. I think we're sitting here on a victory Tuesday.
Yeah, not losing sometimes is a victory, and we'll take that. Having not played and not lost, and watching the Bills find a new way to lose in the last seconds of a game, and that wasn't 13 seconds, but it was still impressive. They go from 13 seconds to 12 men. I wonder what's next.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I think ever since that 13 seconds, they have been a broken team in those last second situations. And so I think the Chiefs really did a number on Buffalo, kind of killing that momentum they had that one season. But the Bills weren't the only team that blew it, though, Stags. I mean, we saw the Ravens blow a 31-17 lead at home to Cleveland and lost that game. We saw the Bengals, Tyler Boyd, he's someone that likes to talk. He dropped the touchdown pass that could have put them above, ahead in Houston or against Houston, ended up giving Houston a chance to win it on a last second field goal. Bengals aren't even in the playoff picture as of right now. We saw the Jaguars lose to the 49ers at home 34-3, just got curb stomped. I mean, and the Chargers lost. I mean, it was all up for the Chiefs this weekend. I don't know. Was there any most surprising loss to you out of all the ones that we just talked about?
I mean, I think the Ravens losing to the Browns is sort of a big deal. That's a really interesting division with the Ravens, the Steelers, the Browns, and with the Bengals in last place in that division, but still with a winning record. I mean, I know you said they're on the outside looking in at the moment. Obviously, you're not going to have 4 playoff teams from that division. Somebody's going to fall off, but it's an interesting, group of teams that are just beating up on each other in some ways. So that one was surprising for sure, given that the Ravens are the other top team in the AFC right now.
Yeah, so the Ravens are the 2 seed at 7-3 because the Chiefs are alone. They're sitting atop the AFC at 7-2 right now. Only one conference loss, right? They've only lost to Denver. The other loss was to Detroit, an NFC team. Ravens are at 7-3, the 2 seed right now. The Jaguars are the 6-3, 3 seed, and the Dolphins are the 4 seed at 6-3. But the Browns, who did again just beat the Ravens on Sunday, are 6-3 at the 6 seed. And the Steelers are 6-3 at the 5 seed right now. Would love for them to creep into the playoffs again. Feel like that's we've seen them a few times, in situations where we kind of liked that a few years ago. Big Ben, I think it could be a similar game as that. So, although I do think they're about to fall off probably with teams. But how about the Texans at 5-4, the 7 seed? It's just it is amazing how crowded the AFC playoff picture is. And the Chiefs are 1 game ahead of everybody, and they still have a chance against the Bills coming up, against the Bengals coming up to have that head-to-head. But they've beaten the Jaguars, they've beaten the Dolphins. I mean, that's a big deal. And this upcoming game against the Eagles, it's a big game. It's very important that they win it, obviously, right? But it is an NFC opponent, so I don't know. They're sitting in a pretty good spot right now.
I mean, you'd definitely rather be a Chiefs fan than a Bills fan this week. Ron's taking way too much pleasure in the Bills blowing that game. For those of you who are watching this online, you can see the joy in Ron's face at the Bills faltering there. It was a fun weekend, as much fun as you can have with not watching the Chiefs play, because every single other thing went their way, including Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift in Argentina. I mean, she's changing lyrics for our guy now. I mean, that is for anybody who was questioning whether or not that was a real thing, I feel like it's going to another level now.
Yeah, that was a nice little video, and yeah, I imagine there's still people that are like, oh, that was staged. How is there a camera right there to capture it perfectly? And there's multiple angles. Yeah, no, it is amazing, Sags, how people will still probably do that. But shout out Travis, shout out, their relationship. But
now, do we need to talk about that? Is this going to be a problem for the Chiefs? By the way.
Yeah, no, I have to ask you because our friends at Good Morning Football this morning had to ask the question to former Chiefs GM. So I have to ask you, Stags, should the Chiefs front office be concerned over Travis Kelce's mid-season extracurricular activities? That's how they're putting it, Stags.
It's funny that they asked this question to Scott Pioli, he of candy wrapper fame. This is somebody who tried to rule with this iron fist, and obviously it didn't work out so well. Andy Reid was asked about it, and he said, "I'm just happy that he found somebody he likes, and she found somebody that she likes." That's a perfect Andy Reid answer to that question. He lets them be themselves, lets them enjoy themselves in their free time, and it was the bye week. I mean, come on, what else should he be doing during the bye week?
Well, and I mean, I for those time zone nerds out there that maybe worry about that, Argentina's south, so I don't think you change time zones off very much. Hey, it's only a few hours off, maybe. So shout out Travis being smart, not messing up the sleep schedule, going to see his girl. But come on, Stags, come on. We are coming off the bye week, and we talked about all the AFC contenders losing. I mean, let's talk about it. We talked kind of last week about the rest of the season, kind of how many wins or losses they could have. But how comfortable are you sitting right now that the Chiefs could get the 1 seed yet again, and that it's the Arrowhead Invitational yet again? And Bros Kingdom at Bros Kingdom on Twitter also asked, after the bye, what's your take on KC's chances for the 1 seed? Are we feeling good? Are we feeling good about it?
Yeah, they're sitting in a pretty good spot. Thanks to Kyle Seitz for that question and Bros Kingdom. This is really a decent position for the Chiefs to be in. Obviously, step one is you win your division, right? That's what you got to do first. You got to knock that thing out. Chiefs are sitting up 2.5 games in the division.
Yes.
After the Chargers lost, they're 4-5. The Raiders got to win, but they're 5-5. The Broncos got to win to 4-5. So the rest of the division's pretty clumped up behind them. But the Chiefs sitting up 2.5 games with half a season left to go, you got to feel pretty solid about that. And then, you look at the regular season schedule for some of the other contenders. And I know you pointed out that Buffalo's got a pretty rough path to get back to the playoffs at this point. So some of those teams that you were worried about, or that a lot of people would have been worried about, are maybe going to have a tougher slate than the Chiefs are going to have going forward.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Buffalo is looking at already 5 losses, right? So they're already 2 or 3 games back of the top of the AFC. They still have to play at Philly, in Kansas City, against Dallas at home, at the Chargers, and at the Dolphins. That's a pretty rough slate for a team that pretty much needs to, go undefeated or only have 1 loss in that stretch. But you're also looking at a team like the Bengals, who have 4 losses already, looking up at the Ravens, the Browns, the Steelers in the division. They still, this Thursday night game this week is huge at Baltimore. Cincinnati at Baltimore is going to be a huge game. But they also play the Jaguars. They also play at Pittsburgh. They also play in Kansas City. They also play against the Browns again. You're talking about that AFC North is going to beat each other up. And so Absolutely. I really think that's the key point here is that the AFC North is just going to boom, boom, boom. And then the Chiefs are going to be just sitting there, sitting pretty.
And even Baltimore, the number 1 contender that the Chiefs are going to have to face. You mentioned Baltimore versus the Ravens Bengals coming up this Thursday night. Ravens then have the Chargers, the Rams, the Jaguars, the 49ers, the Dolphins, and the Steelers. Yeah. There's literally, other than the Chargers, you could argue that everybody else the Ravens have to play are playoff contenders.
Yeah, no, the Niners in there is a big thing. They're obviously starting to feel it again once they've gotten Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel back. Miami's just going to still be, there playing well. They even have a pretty tough end of their schedule. Obviously, that game against the Ravens, they still have to play Dallas, and then the Bills at some point. So this AFC, man, the Chiefs, and when you look at their schedule, I mean, they have games against the lowly Green Bay Packers, on the road is one of their road games. They have a game against the Patriots who look like they're about to implode, they still have 2 games against the Raiders left. I mean, when you take all that into account and the fact that they have that margin for error loss wise against the Bills and the Bengals, who they still have to play, hey, if they lose one of those games to those teams, it's not like it's going to be, it's projected to, it's not like it's going to look like they're passing them in the standings, right? The Chiefs have 2 less losses than each of those teams. So if those are your hardest teams and you have that margin for error to work with in those games, it's a really nice path the second half of the season.
Not bad. And so really going back to last week, we had a question about the crystal ball and whether or not, we could pick the rest of the schedule. I think I had the Chiefs down for 3 more losses and you had 2 more. One of those losses I predicted was to Buffalo, and I'm starting to wonder about that game. Really maybe swinging back Kansas City's way now.
Yeah.
I think the best chance the Chiefs have to lose the rest of the season is this coming week, and so we got to talk about that Eagles game as this podcast goes along. But there's a real good chance, I think, that the Chiefs probably can get through the rest of the season with maybe 2 more losses, and that would all but guarantee that they win the division and probably the number 1 seed if they can get by with just 2 more losses.
No, the thing is, I mentioned earlier how this game is an NFC game. It doesn't help or it doesn't hurt in their standings if they lose, tiebreaker wise. But if you do get this win and you do come out of, your probably hardest opponent of the year and you only have 2 losses with the stretch we just talked about, then you're really working with house money. But if you do lose this game, then you have the same record as the Ravens, who you can't get a tiebreaker over besides conference record because there's no head-to-head this year. And you have the same record as the Jaguars and Dolphins and Steelers and Browns, even though, you have the tiebreaker over a few of those teams. So
yeah, it is still a big game. It's absolutely a real opportunity with those teams having lost just this week. It really does open that door. I feel pretty good about their chances because I think they haven't played their best football yet. They've put together a couple of solid all-around performances against pretty much some bad teams, but we haven't seen the offense play its best. Everybody's aware of that. Everybody's talked about it. Everybody is pretty clear that it's fixable and there are things that they can do better. So it's got to make you feel pretty good as a Chiefs fan going into the second half of the season. Hopefully they take this bye week and reset, come back out looking strong on offense, and maybe they're able to really ease in to playoff mode, into that stretch run and start to maybe there's some stuff they've been saving, some players that they've been saving that we've alluded to. We can talk about that as we go along. But for now, if you're cool with it, let's jump right into the Arrowhead Pride Bye Week Awards.
Yes.
There was a great series on arrowheadpride.com for any of you who haven't had a chance to read all those articles. Make sure you do that. We'll try not to spoil all of it with our conversation here. But the team got together, the Arrowhead Pride team got together and voted on a bunch of different categories of awards at the midseason, at the bye week. And we're going to run down through some of those and just kind of give you some highlights or some takes on some of these categories. Ron, I'll let you get us started. Special Teams Player of the Year so far for the arrowheadpride.com bye week awards. This was a pretty easy one.
Well, yeah, give us credit for giving Harrison Butker some love, I feel like, recently on a show, because he's going to get the All-Pro if he continues this. Because Justin Tucker, actually heard this stat, he's 1 for 5 on 50-yard field goals this year, 50-plus yard field goals this year, Justin Tucker. And he's usually the one kind of, winning the award, and Butker's been nails. Correct me if I'm wrong, he still hasn't missed a field goal yet. And I'm going to knock on wood as I say it, but no, absolutely. So shout out Harrison Butker for a great season so far. But, I think he is the most obvious of the awards, although Offensive Rookie of the Year is probably the most obvious. because Rashee Rice is debatably the offensive player of the year, even though he did not win it. Spoiler alert. But he was the offensive rookie of the year, Stags. But defensive rookie of the year was interesting, wasn't it? Who did you vote for out of the two rookies that had the chance? Because I'm setting you up.
Yeah, I was being a little salty on this one. So offensive rookie of the year, obviously Rashee Rice is the guy. He's their number one wide receiver inexplicably at this point of the season. Nobody would have predicted that he was probably the number one guy. And in fact, after the break, we're going to go back and look at our preseason predictions and see how many of these we may have actually predicted prior to the season. But Rashee Rice obviously has been the man there for the offensive rookies. On the defensive side of the ball, there was a couple candidates, Shamari Connor, Felix Enrique Uzama. I voted NA because I haven't seen much from any defensive rookies so far this season. There hasn't been a huge impact. Last year's rookie class is carrying this defense in so many different ways. So we've yet to really see Felix deployed. His snap count has diminished, especially with Charles Omenihu returning. He may not get much opportunity this season. Shamari Connor was the winner, but there's really not a lot of options here for defensive rookie of the year so far.
Yeah, no, there weren't. And you're right. It is a good point that it's because of how well last year's class was playing. There's just not room for some of these guys to contribute. I mean, they had to let go of their 6th-round pick, who I'm still a little salty. Keandre Coburn didn't get a longer chance with the Chiefs, because a lot of people would have predicted he may be one of the top contributors right away. But no, give Shamari Connor some love. Especially this last game against the Dolphins, they were using him a lot on 1st and 2nd down as that slot player to keep McDuffie and Snead on the outside. And what that did was allow him to be a nice run defender. He made a few plays. So I think, honestly, this last week is really what allowed him to kind of deserve it a little more than he did before. Because you're right. I mean, there's just not a lot of going on with either of these guys so far. But most improved player.
Yeah, I was going to say most improved player had a lot of candidates.
Yeah.
I think we
all defensive. No surprise.
What's that?
All defensive. No surprise.
That's true. Nominees included Mike Dana, who's been just playing lights out for Mike Dana. He's probably going to get double-digit sacks this year, which is kind of a big statement for a guy in his position. Leo Chenal's been tremendous, and I think he's really exceeding expectations, or at least meeting what we hoped that we thought he could be. Justin Reed, Willie Gay Jr. I mean, there's lots of candidates for most improved player, but I got to go with, and I think everybody agreed, or a lot of people agreed, my guy, George Karlaftis, has really been phenomenal this year. And I say my guy facetiously just because I was skeptical on his ceiling in the draft. I felt like he had a high floor, but I didn't know how high his ceiling would be. He's already exceeded the expectations that I had for him at this point. I think he's such a nice complement to the rest of the Chiefs pass rush at this point. He's going to have a really, really good season because he's playing better and because he fits so well with the guys around him. And even if he'll have a couple wins, like he had a couple weeks ago, but he can also be that garbage man for the cleaning up when Chris Jones and Charles Omenihu and others force quarterbacks into his arms. So he's the most improved player. He's been phenomenal. But again, you could have picked any one of those defenders and had made a really good case for it.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised he won this, honestly. But it's one of those things that I think, I think he just barely edged Mike Dana out, and Leo Chenal got a few. Who did you vote for? I'm curious, because I actually voted for Justin Reed because I wanted to give him credit for, I feel like his play from last year to this year has been like the most in terms of like impactful, just like improvement wise. I feel like last year he just was so, that he gave up plays and just didn't play aggressively, didn't play with an aggressive mindset. And that's so important at the SPAG safety position. This year, you're seeing it, man. He's flying all over the field. He's playing like a big Tyrann Mathieu at that strong safety position. So I wanted to give Justin Reed his flowers. But did you vote for Karlaftis?
No, I'm actually going back and looking right now. My vote for most improved was for Leo Chenal.
And that's a good one.
I actually really thought about Brian Cook here as well, because I think he's made some strides and really has been an impact playmaker. But yeah, I voted for Leo just because of the multiple ways that they're using him and how he's one of those guys who could have easily been the odd man out on this linebacker room that's pretty solid around him, but he's forced his way into making a role for himself.
All right. Well, the podium, getting down to the defensive, offensive player of the year and MVP. Defensive player of the year, I thought was interesting, but it is actually pretty obvious when it comes down to it. Trent McDuffie won it. He got the majority of the votes, although Chris Jones, Drew Tranquill, and Karlaftis did get a vote. And Tranquill, I think got a few votes and I do think he deserves, some consideration here just because, he stepped in for Bolton so well. And, that could have been a disaster kind of thing, missing your Mike linebacker as much as they have been this year. For him to be as good as he has been in replacement has been great. And in addition to what he does when Bolton is healthy. But Trent McDuffie, man, I mean, he's just been a freaking monster in terms of forcing fumbles, the coverage. Trent McDuffie was a no doubter, I feel like, for defensive player of the year.
Yeah, I love how Trent McDuffie plays physical, how he comes flying in to defend those screen passes and things like that. That really the physicality and the way he hits and the way he tackles has been just a revelation. In addition to his being great in coverage, he should be an All-Pro this year. I think he's on that level at this point. Chris Jones, had he played the full season, maybe without missing that game, maybe he could have had a little bit stronger case. But he kind of disappeared over the last week, so I think there was a little bit of recency bias there. But let's get to the offensive side of the ball, what everybody wants to talk about, because this offense has been electric. Maybe battery powered as opposed to plug-in when it comes to electricity. We got votes for Isaiah Pacheco, obviously Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce came out the winner of the Offensive Player of the Year for the Chiefs, according to the Arrowhead Pride staff. Is that who you voted for?
I went with Isaiah Pacheco because, spoiler alert, I did vote for Travis Kelce as the MVP. He did not win MVP, but I did vote for Travis Kelce as the team MVP. I feel like, just him, and he won Offensive Player of the Year here, just because I think he is the obvious choice for Offensive Player of the Week. But Isaiah Pacheco, at the same time, I feel like, he's had his ups and downs as a player even this year, but his improvement from last year, he's had games where he's really been, the focal point, and beat the Jets with a big game, had big runs against, teams like, earlier in the season, the Bears and the Jacksonville Jaguars second half of that game, when the offense was sputtering. They need to use him more. And so I think, someone else, a guy like Travis Kelce deserves this over him, but I voted him just because Kelce was my MVP. So he deserves second, I think. I think he deserves it over Mahomes, if I'm being completely honest with you. What do you think?
Take there. I actually voted for Pacheco as well because
nice.
He is the spark plug. We may have been the only two that voted for Pacheco for this particular award, but I just feel like he's such the spark plug for this offense, and he's somebody that they can really build around. Now that I look at it, we're not the only two that voted for him. I think he got four. He got 4 votes amongst the staff here, but still, he's the guy that really makes this thing go. And if they're honest about their self-scouting, if they really did their homework in this bye week, like we expect that they have, the coaching staff should take a look at it and say, when does this offense work its best? It's best when it's balanced. It's balanced when they use Pacheco. And he also happens to be that energy giver, that guy who just brings that different level of excitement and spark and physicality to this offense. He's a difference maker. And I've been preaching it for weeks. They've got to build the second half offense around Pacheco and Rashee Rice. They do that along with Kelce and Mahomes, of course. If they do that, this offense has an identity. They're physical. They're young. They've got some energy. Those are players you can build around. So, yeah, that's why I voted for Pacheco. Kelce is obviously deserving. The guy is incredible. The first, handful of games this season was completely unstoppable. Teams have been really focusing on him, and that should open things up for other players. So his importance to this offense can't be overstated. You can't take that guy for granted. If he's not in that lineup, it is not the same team. So I get it. I think there's a reason he gets this award. Pacheco just might be a less obvious choice.
Yeah, and I think, Pacheco, there's been some arguments that, maybe the offensive line hasn't helped him at times this year, either. I've been saying that they have, there's some, but he has, he's had his ups and downs, but his play as a receiver this year, he's had some great pass pro reps. So I think all that plays into it. But team MVP, Stags, I thought this was very accurate, and I wasn't, I didn't vote for this. I didn't want to hop on the bandwagon, but it was a very good idea. I think Pete kind of got it going. Shout out Pete Sweeney, the boss man. But team MVP, defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, and I love it. I think it's 100% true. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the Chiefs, given bye weeks, so there's not 100% apples to apples comparison, but they're currently tied with the 49ers for least points allowed this season by a defense. They're keeping the Chiefs in every single game. They're winning some games outright. I would argue that this last game, that Trent McDuffie, play against Miami was the play of the season, and that touchdown was the difference in that game. And then they were able to hold them to a shutout after that. So, yeah, I think that there's a big case to be made that this defense is not only competent, but they're keeping this team competitive. So Steve Spagnuolo is a great choice. I went with Patrick Mahomes because he is literally the MVP, and I think even though he hasn't been at his best, there's no player more important to this team still than Patrick Mahomes. This team will still go as far as Mahomes carries them. So MVP, most valuable player, there's nobody more valuable in the NFL than Patrick Mahomes. So until proven otherwise, he's going to have my vote there. But Spagnuolo is a nice choice just because, again, overall, this team has been so impressive on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and it's just the way he is going, he's changing his game plan depending on what's going on to use certain players, put them in the best positions. Leo Chenal gets more snaps depending on the game. Shamar Connor gets more snaps. Like he's kind of, working with a full hand of, a nice hand of cards, I should say. And he is playing it right. And it's cool to see. I do think he deserves that team MVP. I voted for Travis Kelce. I just feel like, the pass offense, I think it's clear that Mahomes is really, only comfortable throwing to either Kelce or I guess the rookie receiver, obviously Rashee Rice. But yeah, I just feel like Kelce's impact on the pass offense and obviously Mahomes is, needs to, overcome that. But I think a lot of that is just how good Kelce is, how good he is at getting himself open, giving him, that window to be, to get it to him quickly and everything. So shout out Travis Kelce. But there's offenses just, they got to get it going in the second half. And I'm sure Mahomes will end up, deserving of the MVP and the offensive player of the year by the end of the year, I'm sure.
You bet. Well, because it's bye week time and everybody's taking a look back and a look forward, I did write the article that I typically do for the site, which is Market Movers, where we talk about what Chiefs are trending in which direction. What I try to do this time, normally I'm looking at this coming week to say who's trending heading into this game, and I'll still probably write that one before this matchup against the Eagles and just talk about some matchup-specific stuff. But I looked back at the first half of the season and looked at who were some of the biggest risers, some of the biggest fallers in the rankings amongst the Chiefs players. We've talked a lot about some of the guys who are on the risers list. I want to highlight Charles Omenihu as he's really the third one I listed here, but has been a really impactful guy that started off not even on the roster, right? This is his first year with the Chiefs, and he had to sit out that 6-game suspension. This is somebody who came in late, but is really making a difference. And I think if you see this defense excel, a lot of it is the complementary play of these pass rushers, and Omenihu, I think, is a big part of that. So he's been one of the biggest risers for me so far this season. Thoughts on Charles Omenihu?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. He's only played 3 games, but you saw the pass rush impact mostly in that Chargers game. But then if you watch that Dolphins game, he also played a very important role in the early down stuff, playing that edge defender role. There was one run where he just forced the running back to take a really wide angle to the sideline because he just shoved the offensive tackle back so far and kind of forced a tackle at the line of scrimmage. So shout out to Menahue. He's definitely someone that deserves to be a bowl.
Well, unfortunately, there was also some guys who moved down the rankings due to expectations. And all three of these are people who I had high hopes on or when the season started. Two that I thought would be kind of up and comers. So we talked about Felix Anudike-Uzama. I think just the fact that his role has narrowed and decreased so much, it feels like he might be honestly getting the red shirt treatment a little bit this season. He may not have a big impact until next year. Not that he hasn't been good enough. I think he's shown little flashes that he's going to be good, but he's certainly not been an impact player on the field like maybe we had hoped prior to the season starting.
Yeah, no, Felix is one of those guys that's kind of in a position to like it's all gravy if he does contribute. He doesn't need to necessarily be, the impact producing guy, especially now that Charles Menahue is back in the mix. Before he was consistently that fourth rusher. Now he's more kind of a sub rusher, kind of the fifth guy in line, on a third down. So it's okay. He kind of needed a few years to develop, in my opinion, anyway. So I'm glad I'm excited to see his future still with the team.
Well, somebody who the future may not be the brightest, somebody who's had a great run. Joe Thuney has been one of the league's best, and it's been true for a long time. He's just been an absolute machine, technique-wise, consistency, leverage, intelligence as far as picking up protections and picking up blitzes and picking up stunts. But this offensive line as a whole has started to show some cracks, maybe. I mean, they're still a good unit. They're still not giving up a lot of sacks. Obviously, some of that's due to Patrick Mahomes, but I'm a little bit concerned about the trend for Joe Thuney, and not just him. There's other points along the line that have not played their best, but Thuney has been so reliable in the past. I'm a little worried he's maybe taking a little setback.
Yeah, I think you can see it, especially in the run game, like you kind of mentioned. I just think at some point it kind of makes sense that as most offensive linemen, they can kind of get better with age depending on who they are. But it's a lot of times those guys are the big dudes, the dudes that are just overwhelmingly huge and like kind of just get even stronger. With man strength, 35-year-old strength that you naturally get. It's just as someone that has more experience as the guys you're going against. But when you're Joe Thuney and you're, 280, I think he's not 300 pounds. I don't believe so. He's a smaller dude, and he always has been. He's always won with, awesome leverage, awesome balance, awesome, technique, like you mentioned. But when it starts to go strength wise, when it starts, when you're not as strong or as your core is not as strong, or you're just and the injuries kind of pile up a little more, like the little ding ups. I'm not saying he is injured. I'm just, in terms of every offensive lineman goes through little bang ups. So it's interesting, man. But at the same time, they have a chance to use the bye week to get right and come out firing second half of the year.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. Speaking of coming out firing in the second half, I've been predicting or speculating, and I think it's not just me. We've all been talking about how Kadarius Toney has really just been, not a big part of the offense. Ever since he sort of struggled in the first week after coming off the injury, it seems like he's not getting a ton of snaps. He's not getting a bunch of designed looks. He get 1 or 2 targets a game. Hasn't done much with them. Had one nice play this last week, but in general, it's been a rough season for Kadarius Toney. And so I guess maybe optimistically, I've been saying maybe they're saving him for the second half. Maybe they're just keeping him under wraps, keeping him healthy, keeping him on the field, but not really making him the focal point until the playoff run. Andy Reid came out this week and basically confirmed that thought. John Dixon said something similar. Watch for him coming down the stretch. So he's my sleeper pick, the value pick for the second half of the season on market movers. He might be somebody who looks like a huge disappointment in the first half, but by the end of the season, we're talking about him in that, playmaker conversation again.
Yeah, no, what Andy Reid specifically said was, hey, this dude had knee surgery in training camp. Like, let's remember that. Like, there's no such thing as a minor surgery. I know it's a saying, anytime you go under under the knife like that, there's you got to be cautious with it coming back. So I hope he's being true. I know we can't just take coaches at their word all the time. We can't be that naive, but come on. I think it makes a ton of sense because you still see him be the most electric guy after the catch a lot of times, especially more than Sky Moore. And you're seeing Sky Moore's snaps go down. We saw it this last game against the Dolphins. His snap rate significantly decreased. So I think there is room for Tony to step back into a more primary role as the games get more important.
Well, let's go to break and hear from our sponsors. Ron, if you've got what NFL player am I queued up?
I got trivia. I'm going to give you some trivia, some Chiefs right. Eagles trivia.
All right. Go ahead.
So we got Chiefs Eagles in Arrowhead, right? Because it's the first time it's been a little bit since the last time these two met up in Kansas City. Simple question, Stags. Who was the quarterback the last time the Eagles came to Kansas City? That's all I want to know. That's all I need to know.
We'll get to that after the break. Stick with us on the Out of Structure podcast. And we're back on the Out of Structure podcast. Thanks for sticking with us. We've got lots of your questions yet to come, along with a look ahead or a look back, first of all, at some of the predictions we made preseason, and then a look ahead to a huge matchup coming this week against the Eagles. But in the meantime, Ron's trying to stump me with some trivia. He asked who the quarterback was for the Eagles the last time they came to Kansas City to play against the Chiefs. I don't have a clue. I'm going to guess Carson Wentz and see what the actual answer was.
Bingo. Yeah, it was pretty easy. 2017, week 2. Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl that year. This is Alex Smith's last year. Famous that game was famous for a Travis Kelce hurdle into the end zone, just jumping over like 3 dudes. And then Kareem Hunt had like a 40-yard touchdown run in his second game of his career that kind of helped cap it. So little Chiefs history there, little Chiefs Eagles history.
Whew. Yeah, I almost forgot about that game. All right. Preseason prediction check-in. Let's look back at some predictions that were made on this very podcast before the season started. Some of these are betting lines, so I'm going to let you kick off with some of the stats, the over-under betting lines on a handful of Chiefs players here. And we'll see which one of us got more of these things right.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Patrick Mahomes, we all were excited that he would have a pretty big season. Obviously, his over-under was 36.5 passing touchdowns and 4,800 passing yards. He's on pace for under on both of those, and we obviously both chose over. But there's a chance, he steps it back up. He's on pace for 32 touchdowns, so he needs to just kind of increase that by 5. And he's on pace for 4,600 passing yards. So he could still get those overs if he cranks up the game. But the interceptions was interesting, Stacks, because I had him under 11.5 interceptions. I figured that's a lot. But he does have 8 right now. And he's on pace for 15. You had the over. So I don't know. You might be looking good there. What do you think? Do you think he's going to have 4 more interceptions?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think I had him for 13 or something was my prediction. I think that still feels about right. He's had some bad ones this year. Really has, just kind of situationally frustrating. But
yeah,
it's part of the game. I think he'll have a cleaner second half than he did the first half. He's not going to have another 8, I don't think, but I think he'll probably hit that 11.5 pretty easily.
Yeah. No, his career high is 13 interceptions, so he's on pace for 15. So it is definitely a unprecedented kind of interception kind of season for Mahomes so far.
Yeah,
we both predicted Isaiah Pacheco to be the snap leader in the running back room. Pretty obvious there. He is by far. The receiver room, though, Stags, this is where it got a little off here. We both predicted Sky Moore to lead the team in receptions.
Yeah,
right now.
He had such a big opportunity this year. I mean, it seemed so obvious that he was going to step in and take his role plus Juju Smith-Schuster's role and lead this room, be the reliable go-to guy. Man, it's frustrating that hasn't played out so far for him, but a nice surprise in the guy who actually does lead the room.
Yeah, Rashee Rice has twice as many receptions as Sky Moore does right now, 32-16, which is kind of sad, but that's okay. And I predicted MVS to have the most receiving yards in the room. You predicted Sky, and again, it's Rashee Rice. and then you predicted Sky to have the most touchdowns. Or no, excuse me, I did, and you predicted Kadarius Toney to have the most touchdowns. I mistyped that. I think it was you that had Toney.
Yeah,
and Rashee Rice leads the receiver room in touchdowns as well. So I don't think anyone would have guessed the rookie to be a clean sweep in the wide receiver room. So we can give ourselves a pass on that, right, Stags?
Yeah, I mean, the bad news is we were wrong about Sky Moore. The good news is the Chiefs seem to have a number one wide receiver right now. Everybody's been wanting that for a while. So we didn't think it was going to be Rashee Rice this early in his career, but hey, you got that rookie contract. You got a long time of team control there. If he continues to be the number one wide receiver and the second receiving threat, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I will say, that our logic in terms of Sky kind of maybe being the Juju Smith-Schuster in this group, that was the logic there, I think, at least on my end. And I think on your end for the receptions as well, because Juju was that wide receiver one in receptions. Well, Rashee is the Juju in the group. So I think the logic, let's give ourselves some credit there. No, that's my way of, that's a spin zone. That's a pretty good spin zone.
I like it. Well, we had another over-under that we were trying to figure out. Yards per rushing attempt, 4.7, which was last year's mark. They were 8th in the NFL in this figure last year. I said they'd be under 4.7 this season. You said they'd be over, which is a bold take. Where are they at?
They are under. So you get this one too, as well as the interceptions one earlier. So you're getting me. You're edging me out right now. But yeah, they're only at 4.1 yards per attempt. So that's 15th in the NFL. So still middle of the pack. That's fine. Chiefs don't need to be one of the best rushing teams in the NFL. But, I did buy into, the offensive line maybe being a better fit for Andy Reid's zone schemes, running those, and maybe that's the Chiefs, just being more efficient on the ground. Not true. And I'm learning very quickly that Orlando Brown Jr. and Andrew Wiley were much better run blocking offensive tackles than Jawan Taylor and Donovan Smith are. Which that's okay. They'll get through it. I think the pass offense just needs to kind of carry them more. But, I definitely swung and missed on the run game. I think they're missing. If there's one thing they're missing about Orlando Brown Jr., it's him in the run game because he definitely helped them carve out some yards.
You bet. Now, we didn't miss on the team leader in sacks other than Chris Jones. We both picked George Karlaftis, which was an obvious choice. And he actually is ahead of Chris Jones so far in sacks, granted with one more game in. He's got 6 sacks to Chris Jones has, 5.5?
Yeah.
So George Karlaftis performing, again, above expectations. Linebacker was really interesting because we were really trying to figure out preseason at the time, where does Drew Tranquil fit in this list? How in the world are they going to get all 4 of these linebackers action this season? We both thought Drew Tranquil would lead the team in snaps for linebackers, and that was true. We thought that Nick Bolton would continue to lead the linebacker room in tackles. Of course, he's been hurt, so you can't really say that we were wrong there per se, but Tranquil, right, the guy who's been filling in for him, took over that spot. Any surprises on snaps or tackles from the linebacker room for you?
I think like in tackle for losses, the leader is Chenal. Leo Chenal does have the most tackle for losses of the linebacker group. I think we both would have loved to have said that Chenal, playing more on the edge, would have been able to do that, would have made sense. I think we're just a little hesitant to believe that, they would actually go through with using him in that way. But that's why he is a tackle for loss leader, because he is being used on the line of scrimmage as a 5th defensive lineman at times, and he plays well doing that. So it's not a surprise, but it is something where like I think we were just we wanted to say give Chanel more credit for that, but I'm glad Spags is actually using him in that way. So that was cool to see.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll say, again, you picked Nick Bolton for this one, and he's been hurt, so you can't really hold that against him too much. Interceptions, though, Nick Bolton was my pick for the interception leader. Drew Tranquil was yours. Right now, Bolton is the only linebacker that has an interception, so I've got a slight lead in that category. And then we talked about sacks as well. Again, we'd love for Chanel to be the leader here. He has 3. Willie Gay has 1. That was your pick for the leader. My pick was Drew Tranquil, and he is the sack leader for the linebackers so far at 3.5. So Drew Tranquil is really nearly sweeping the categories here in linebackers, and has been just a phenomenal addition. So whether we're right or wrong, maybe is less important than the fact that Drew Tranquil has been amazing and Leo Chanel has been better than expected.
Yeah, no, the linebacker group's been fun to watch. The defensive backs have been as well, and so we both predicted McDuffie to lead the team in snaps, which I think makes sense because he is the corner that does not come off the field, but neither does Snead, and Snead does have just 7 more snaps than him, and so does Justin Reed, and so we both got edged out there by Justin Reed and L'Jarius Snead. Trey McDuffie, I don't know why he missed those 7 snaps. I'd have to go back and remember what the reasoning was, but in tackles, we both missed again. McDuffie is the tackle leader in the defensive backfield. He's earning that defensive player of the year for a reason that we talked about earlier. I had Brian Cook, which I do feel like, that probably wasn't the best choice. He's a free safety. He's not going to be around the ball as much as these other guys. You had L'Jarius Snead, who is pretty close to the lead. He's almost tied for second, which was a good choice. But interceptions, you got it there with Snead. Although wait, no, we both got it here because there's only 1 interception for any of the defensive backs, and they're all tied at the top. I had Brian Cook, you had L'Jarius Snead, and then the tackle for losses. Snead has the most. I predicted him. You predicted Brian Cook, but Mike Edwards does have the second most, who has been kind of that other free safety. So the safeties have been getting active in the backfield, and then the sacks as well, right? You predicted Shamari Connor to have the most sacks, which he's been blitzed a few times. He's got some pressures. I predicted McDuffie, I think, just to switch it up. But yeah, Justin Reed, Mike Edwards, and Jalen Watson all each have 1 sack, so no one's gotten more than 1, and so they've gotten pressure with the blitzes. But I think a lot of times those pressures just turn into other guys getting sacks. So, so yeah, it is kind of surprising that only 1 DB. There's only 1 sack for any of the DBs. I was kind of surprised by that.
Well, the real lesson here is that this secondary has been amazing, and there's so many different options in every one of these categories. So the stats aren't concentrated with any one player. There are different guys leading all different categories and tied for all these different categories. It's really hard to find a weak link in the secondary at this point. Everybody's been playing well, and they've got a deep rotation, and it's really an embarrassment of riches when you have McDuffie and Snead as your outside corners, and then the rest of those guys are rotating around. Because I think you could have made a case for Joshua Williams as one of the more improved players as well. I think he's been really good. Jalen Watson, always seems to make the big play, so he's definitely clutch, if nothing else. And Edwards has been great as far as helping force turnovers. Yeah. It's really been fun, and that's why Shamari Connor is leading the rookies. I predicted that they would use him really specifically in a pass rushing role, but either way, he's somebody who has a future with this team, but so do a lot of other guys. So it's going to be a really interesting offseason when they look at this defensive backfield and try to figure out who to pay and who to keep.
Yeah, no, you could really see how Connor becomes kind of like Snead's early career, that slot defender that's, really good against the run, blitzes a lot, gets sacks. And we talked about that in the offseason. So you can definitely see that. But let's keep talking about the blitz, right? Because we got some mailbag questions that we're going to end the show with. Jake Wilson at Jake for now actually asked a good one. Why don't you set me up for this, Stags? I got some good stats for this.
All right, Jake's our guy. He's always asking great questions. True or false? Kansas City's defense is able to generate pressure more consistently this season and is less reliant on the blitz. What do you think? And what have you seen statistically as far as their reliance on the blitz and their ability to generate pressure? Would you agree with Jake's statement or not?
Well, first of all, on the surface, what would you say on off the top of your head, true or false? That's a true or false statement.
I would say on the surface it's true
Right.
because you've got you've got more pass rush coming from that defensive line. You've got more bodies there that are actually generating pressure and the Leo Chenal effect. So I would say, without looking at the stats, I would assume that that was true.
Yeah, I would too. And so they are getting more pressure this year. They're generating pressure 28% of the time this year. That's compared to 25% last year. Second in the NFL this year, fifth in the NFL last year. So both in the top 10 or top 5, excuse me, in the NFL. Blitz rate though. The Chiefs last year blitzed 24% of the time. That was 14th in the NFL. This year they have blitzed nearly 34% of the time. That's 6th in the NFL. So almost a 10% increase in blitz rate compared to last year. And so what I think that tells you is they are sending blitzes obviously more often, but I think that tells you that they're just having more guys at the line of scrimmage to start. Because it does feel like they don't need to use the blitz as much, but it does feel like they like to use Leo Chenal, Willie Gay, Drew Tranquill. It's mostly Leo Chenal, but other guys too, where they put them up at the line of scrimmage, and then boom, that's a fifth guy that counts as a blitz if it's a pass down, and I think that's where you're getting that bigger number from. So while I still think it's true that they don't need to rely on the blitz as much, I still think, I mean, it obviously shows that they are using the blitz more often statistically, but I do think that's just because that's Spags using his players like a Leo Chenal, kind of using his chess pieces more and more, and being smart with kind of how to use his best, his most talented players, because Leo is a very talented player, and so is Willie, and so is Drew, and so is Bolton, and they all need to be playing, even when they're all healthy, right? So yeah, it kind of speaks to that maybe.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not as obvious when it's the linebacker blitz and he's up on the line of scrimmage as it is when the corner
Right.
or safety comes flying in. It's maybe just a definitional thing. Let's get to Thomas Ramirez's question on the offensive side. What needs to happen first for the Chiefs to repeat? Does the offensive line need to pick up stunts better, or do the wide receivers need to gain Pat's trust more and be more productive? Who do you think needs to improve more to improve the Chiefs' chances of repeating?
That's a good question, but I will say, if the O-line can give Patrick Mahomes, ample time like they have at plenty times this season, I think the pass offense will be fine. It's important, obviously, for the receivers to get, on the same page with Pat, but a lot of times Pat just needs to, fire away and kind of force it, right? Kind of force them to be on the same page with him. I think there's tighter windows than he'd like to at times to guys like MVS, to guys like Sky Moore, but at the same time, as long as he's getting the time to kind of find guys like Kelsey, Rashee Rice, or get to his check down or get the scramble, I think they'll be fine. So I would say the O-line.
I mean, I'm going to go with the wide receivers here. I think it's a real problem when nobody gets open or Patrick doesn't trust those receivers. I really do think that's an issue. Teams have started to really take away Travis Kelsey more and more, daring the Chiefs to beat them with any other wide receiver on the field. And I think that's something that has to happen. They've got to have receivers step up. Rashee Rice has done so, but you can't just have one wide receiver step up and still be targeting 10 receivers a game with one or two targets. It's just they need to narrow that room down. We've been saying it for weeks, and some of those guys need to really step up and play the way they're capable of. Because you don't want to be in a situation where Kelsey is either injured or taken away by a defense and they have no other options. And you see Mahomes out there just running for his life because he's holding the ball. So I think, to me, Mahomes is good enough to make the offensive line good enough when it comes to pass protection, as long as he has somewhere to throw the ball. But he's got to get on the same page. And we have that question from Chikorito on Twitter. Do we see Mahomes and the receivers get on the same page this week against the Eagles? I don't know if it happens this week. You would hope that the bye was a nice, reset, self-scouting kind of a week, but I think getting the receivers on the same page is critical for the second half.
Yeah, and there's a chance, because if you actually look at the Eagles' defensive statistics, they're 31st in terms of pass attempts against. So they get the ball thrown on them a lot. They've allowed the most passing touchdowns in the NFL this year. They've intercepted the ball the fourth fewest in the NFL this year, the fourth fewest times, and they've allowed the fifth most passing yards in the NFL this year. So, hey, there's a chance that, that secondary for Philadelphia, isn't as talented as some that the Chiefs have faced this year. It's just about the pass rush that they need to get past. So there's a chance that, the Chiefs pass game can get going this week.
It'd be nice, and it'd be a great time for it, because as we talked about before, this is just such a huge game for the Chiefs to really get ahead and to stay ahead of pace in the AFC. Getting this win now when everybody else just lost would really be huge for them. I'm going to go back to Jake Wilson's question. He had a second part to his first question, which said, should Chiefs fans anticipate improvements in complementary football and the ability to leverage a lead in the second half? What do you think? I think this is an interesting question, because the Chiefs are obviously at their best when both the offense and defense are playing complementary football. I think that's a Captain Obvious type point on my part, but the defense has been great. The offense has been good enough-ish, right, for the most part in the first half. Do you think there's the ability for them to start really building leads, holding on to those leads, and having the offense and the defense both in that top 5 level in the NFL?
Yeah, if you look statistically, they're not very good in the second half this year. And so, yeah, that's something they really do need to be better at, obviously, as they get down the stretch, as they get down to, the important games, closing these big games out. They have the defense down. I think the defense is doing their part and doing it for the most part, even though, yeah, there's some second half touchdowns they've allowed. But a lot of that, especially in the Dolphins game, is the Chiefs offense not giving them, time off the field, or just not scoring, keep continuing to, go 3 and out and continuing to give the other team chances. At some point they're going to score. The Chiefs defense can't be perfect. So really what's missing, right, to complete the complementary football is running the dang ball, running the football, so they can win time of possession in the second half, so they can, finish games. We've seen them plenty of times this year punt away at the end of games and give the other team a chance to win when they can't finish out the game. This against the Dolphins on 3rd and short, they can't run the ball. They have to do a play action fake. I've talked about how terrible of a play call that was. Making Mahomes turn his entire back to the defense, and then making him have to make a decision quickly after turning around and having to not see where everyone went. So running the ball would be nice. So that's really, the improvement that needs to be it. And they have the talent, in my opinion, to do it on the interior offensive line. On the offensive tackle position, I think it's an effort thing. Those guys just need to lock in, when the game plan is run oriented, run heavy. And yeah, I think it could be a way that they kind of improve and really, come full circle in the second half of the year.
I love that. Again, I'll keep repeating it until it becomes a reality, building this second half offense around Isaiah Pacheco
Yes.
And Rashee Rice to complement Travis Kelce. That's the type of offense that could extend time of possession, put teams away, and close games out. I like that approach. We'll see what happens with that. Let's dive right into the Eagles preview and talk a little bit about this upcoming matchup. It's Monday Night Football. You'll be there in person.
Yes.
This is going to be a playoff atmosphere, Super Bowl rematch, Kelsey Bowl rematch. I mean, what else can you ask for from a game coming out of the bye where Andy Reid's teams are usually pretty phenomenal?
And the Eagles are coming out of a bye as well. So I really feel like we're talking about a great game of football, and that we're going to see just 2 really solid, good teams that have been together for enough time where, they're going to be, pulling out some really, game oriented plays or game, not trick plays necessarily, but just, best of the best kind of game plan. Their opening script is going to be, very, strong. It's you're going to have guys locked in. I mean, I can't imagine how locked in guys like Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce are going to be for Kelce Bowl #2. I love it. And that's the thing. I'm actually going to write for the site this week. I'm going to watch that Super Bowl again from a really close eye and really kind of detail what has changed since the Super Bowl on the field and what can maybe, what maybe makes the difference one way or the other because of those things. And one obvious thing, Stags, is they just all of a sudden have Jalen Carter, one of the best defensive players in the NFL already, in my opinion, one of the best defensive front players in the NFL, in my opinion, already. He's a rookie. He was the number 10 overall pick. And just an absolute dog because he's from Georgia Bulldogs, but just someone that's going to give the Chiefs a lot of trouble with a front that's already really good. So yeah, I think the Eagles pass rush is probably the number one thing.
The Eagles pass rush has been great. They've got, they've got a handful of guys who can get after the passer, and most of them are from Georgia. You've got also on offense, DeAndre Swift is new, and he's been really, really good this season. Over 600 yard rushing already, along with 166 yards receiving. Productive player, big play threat, somebody that gives them that extra compliment. They have just a bunch of different running backs that they use, plus Jalen Hurts likes to run the ball. So will you see, I think you've got more playmakers on offense, more playmakers on defense for the Eagles. The only question for me is what version of Jalen Hurts are we going to see in this game? The Super Bowl version of Jalen Hurts was phenomenal. He played one of the best games in the postseason that you will ever see from a quarterback. Has he been on that level the rest of the year? It's been hit and miss. He's had a good season, but is he going to be the playmaker that really decides this game, or will it be Swift and the defense, or AJ Brown, who's been just ridiculous this season?
Yeah, no, the Eagles offense has been very good this year. AJ Brown looks like T.O. Like he's kind of what T.O. was, I feel like, back in the day. Just big, but also just can run by you if he needs to. Just fast enough. Can't be tackled one-on-one, just jumps, catches everything over you. The Chiefs really need to make sure L'Jarius Sneed is on AJ Brown as much as possible, because as much as Trent McDuffie has succeeded this year, he is going to be in a nightmare situation if he's guarding AJ Brown down the field. I mean, just no offense, but it's just going to be hard. But Sneed has the size, has the length to match up, and McDuffie and Devontae Smith are a beautiful coverage matchup, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, like you mentioned with Smith. So yeah, it's going to be a really fun game.
Devontae Smith is, on pace for 1,000 yards as well. I mean, they're going to have, they've got plenty of receiving threats there, along with Dallas Goedert, who's been pretty good of late as well.
He is injured. He broke his leg. So
that's right.
They are without Dallas Goedert, which is a big hit for them, because he's a mismatch. He was a mismatch in the Super Bowl, if you guys remember. He made some really great plays in the Super Bowl, even though Justin Reed had great coverage at times. And so that's a big difference too that we should shout out. The Eagles don't have a high quality backup tight end behind him. I believe it's Jack Stoll or somebody else.
Okay. There, that's a difference. Something that's the same, obviously, is going to be the tush push, the short yardage. They're still 92%. Shout out to the podcast there, or better on those quarterback sneaks. The Chiefs still refuse to do the quarterback sneak, even as many pointed out last week. There was other teams are begging them to run the quarterback sneak, giving them the first down, probably untouched. On the quarterback sneak, if they were willing to run it. Is this the week we finally see Mahomes run the sneak, give them a taste of their own medicine?
I actually hope not, because I really want them to save that or Mahomes at least to save that, because the coaching staff somehow going to screw this up and run it. They're going to pull it out in a meaningless regular season game. And then it's going to give it away for the playoffs. No, save it for the most crucial third or fourth down we have in the AFC Championship, or even the divisional round, if it comes to that point. But because you're right. And there's one play in the Dolphins game where, they play it like it's a 1st and 10, like there's just no crowding of the A gap, and so that's easy money if the Chiefs will do it.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. Obviously, what else could we see this week? That maybe they haven't used so far this season. Is there anything matchup specific that you can think of that you'd like to see the Chiefs pull out this week against the Eagles?
Well, that's the thing about the Super Bowl that the Chiefs did execute was playing in tight end, multiple tight end sets, passing out of it, trying to get the Eagles linebackers on the field and stretching them, and really taking advantage of that. The Chiefs have not been able to do that this year because they just don't have the threat. We've talked about it with Blake Bell as that third tight end. And so that'll be something that, to counter that, maybe the Chiefs, instead of kind of going heavy with the linebackers, maybe they kind of flip it on its head and, hey, let's go spread out. Let's get, super light with it. Let's get a lot of receivers on the field at a time. Let's only keep, Kelsey or Gray on the field at a time. And kind of just try to, get it light and spread out the box so they can run on this Eagles team and kind of, try to take advantage of light boxes. But that's the thing, I think that is one thing the Eagles defense is kind of weak at, is probably the linebacker position. Or the safety position before they got Kevin Byard. Now he's freaking there. Howie Roseman doing it again. So no, this Eagles back end can be taken advantage of. It's just all about handling that the front part of the line of scrimmage. And so maybe it is, maybe it is more of a run heavy kind of game, but I just feel like it might be better to do that because you're not going to have much of a pass threat with your heavy sets anyway. So you might as well try to get them to think about the pass by running out of lighter formations.
Yeah. Has Blake Bell been that bad this year, or is it the uniqueness of the threat from Jody Fordson that's missing? And I think you mentioned that in previous weeks, but we'd like to see more production out of those other tight ends. I think Noah Gray was a candidate for most improved. I think he's been pretty good.
He's been good, yeah.
Yeah, but past him, it seems to really drop off right now.
Yeah, no, I think Jody does deserve a lot of credit for just the kind of player he was. He was definitely someone that, if a team's going to treat him like a tight end, he can run past you like a wide receiver. And so, that helped the Chiefs out a lot, even if it wasn't him getting the ball. That it forced safeties and linebackers to kind of bail out, and all of a sudden the middle of the field's wide open because, all these linebackers are freaking out because they're getting stretched so hard. Blake Bell's not stretching the field. And so, and he's not threatening to, and teams don't even care to, if he tries to threaten or stretch the field, they're not concerned about it, So I think that is a big deal in kind of the way the Chiefs played well against the Eagles last time. They don't really have that thing in their back pocket.
I'd really like to see Andy Reid get the screen game going this week.
Yes,
because this is an aggressive, pass rushing defense and good up the field type players on the defensive front. And you mentioned maybe their linebackers aren't the biggest strength of the Eagles team. Get Pacheco out there. Get even Sky Moore, McCole Hardman, Kadarius Toney. You've got lots of guys that can catch a wide receiver screen or a running back screen and make something happen. Get these offensive linemen out and moving in space and doing some different stuff. I think it might be a pretty fun game plan to see them try to neutralize that pass rush with a screen game and get the running game going through the air.
Yeah, no, I like that idea too, for sure. Because not only are these are aggressive defensive linemen, but a few of them are young, right? And so, younger guys can get, over aggressive in the right moments. And Andy's really good at kind of setting them up to really get upfield, and all of a sudden they're getting turned around. So I like that idea. Screen game should definitely be a big part of the game plan.
Any final thoughts? I don't know if we're going to put a prediction on the record for this game, but I can't think of a better matchup. I think somebody asked, how important is this game in the grand scheme of things? I know we've already touched on that. I think it's a huge opportunity. If they lose, it's not as catastrophic, but if they win, this can really catapult them right back into the conversation of repeating as Super Bowl champions.
Yeah, no, I think a win here just puts them in such a good position in terms of, we talked about it earlier, but like they're going to have a better record than everybody in the AFC, and especially the teams that they still have to play that are contending. they're going to have like 2 or 3 games better of a record if they win this game. So it is very important. But at the same time, they're sitting pretty either way. I think, if the Chiefs lose this game, there's no reason to say, oh, shoot, now, are they as good as last year and can they win the Super Bowl? I think the Eagles are playing very well. I think this is just going to be a super good game. Obviously, it depends on how it goes, but I think if it comes down to the wire, which I think it will, no matter who wins it, I think both these teams, in my opinion, are kind of in a top tier above the rest of the NFL, with just what they've proven as teams, obviously going to the Super Bowl already, and just kind of having the talent that they do, ready to roll.
Maybe the Super Bowl rematch this week will be a preview for the Super Bowl rematch later on this season or in February. Thank you for sticking with us on the Out of Structure podcast and listening as part of your day. We really appreciate you all asking questions via Twitter, via the email inbox that Ron checks occasionally. We're happy to engage with you. We appreciate you all listening and reading the site, arrowheadpride.com. Ron's got some great work up there along with the rest of the team, so make sure you check that out. Give us a rate and review and a question for next week, as hopefully we're discussing a big Chiefs victory next Tuesday on the Out of Structure podcast. We'll talk to you then.